Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat, in which we will discuss 3NF in data normalization, the third normal form in data normalization. Now, in the prior session, we looked at 2NF and we looked at 1NF, the first normal form, the second normal form of data normalization. And guess what? You have to meet 1NF, 2NF before you can reach the third normal form. So in this session, we will briefly review 1NF, 2NF, then we will discuss what is 3NF and work an example to illustrate this concept. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com.
Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today.
So the third normal form is a level of database normalization that aims to reduce the redundancies and dependency of data by ensuring that it meets all the criteria for the second normal form and additional specifics for the third normal form. Now remember, to reach the second normal form, one of the conditions is you have met the first NF, first normal form. That's why you go from the first, second, to reach the third. So to explain the third NF, we have to build on the concept of the first normal form and second normal form. Let's go through each one briefly. Remember, the first normal form require all table columns contain only atomic, indivisible value. That's one condition, and each column has a unique name. There should be no repeating groups or arrays, and we looked at this in the first normal form. Once the table in the first normal form, you can proceed and go to the second normal form. A second normal form, a table must meet 1NF, that's why it's a requirement, and every non-key attribute must be fully functionally dependent on the primary key, meaning no part of the primary key can determine a non-key attribute. And this eliminates what we call partial dependency. We also covered 2NF in the prior session, so you have to meet 1NF, 2NF. What is the third NF? Well, in the third NF, the table must meet 2NF, and it must ensure that all non-key attributes, which is non-primary key, are not only fully functionally dependent on the primary key, it's not only that as in 2NF, but they are also non-transitively dependent. So this is 3NF. You cannot have non-transitively dependency. What does that mean? This means no non-key attribute, it means something that's not primary key, depends on another non-key attribute. So you cannot have a non-key attribute that's dependent on a non-key attribute. So it's depending on something else other than the primary key. Remember, everything has to be dependent on the primary key. In simple terms, every non-key attribute should be dependent only on the primary key. That's it, and nothing else. Now, the best way to illustrate this is to show you an example. But simply put, a non-key attribute cannot dependent on another non-key attribute. Everything should dependent only and only on the primary key. To illustrate, the best way to do so is to look at an example to show you how this works. Let's take a look at this database to illustrate the concept. We have this database. We have a student ID, we have student name, we have school name, and school address. So consider a database of students where each student is associated with a particular school and each school has a unique address. That makes sense. Now, you have to understand here that both school name and school address, so the school name and the school address are non-primary keys, which is non-key attribute. They're not primary keys. School address, so to know the school address, all what you have to do is know the school name. And to know the school name, you have to know the student ID. Well, school address is transitively dependent on student ID through the school name. So to get to the school address, you have to know what's the school. And to know the school, you have to find the ID of the student. So you find the ID of the students. It tells you the student name. The student name tells you the school name. And based on the school name, you find the school address. So this is what we meant by transitively dependent. Because knowing the school name tells you the school address. So the only way to know the school address is to know the school name. But the school name is not a primary key. The school name is a non-key attribute. School address is a non-key attribute. So what's happening is the school address is dependent on the school name, and this is what we call transitively dependent. So a non-key attribute is dependent upon another non-key attribute. So what do we have to do? You guessed it. What? Split into additional tables. This is what we did in 1NF, 2NF. You split into additional tables to remove this transitive dependency. This is what 3NF is all about. So what do we have to do? We have to have a student table, student ID, student name, and the school, because they only go to one school. Then we're going to have school tables, ID for school ID, school name, and address. This way the address is not dependent. Now the address is dependent upon the school ID. So the school ID is the primary key, which is fine, but not dependent upon school name, where the school name was a non-key attribute. So in this arrangement, school address is directly dependent on school ID, not through the student ID. It's not transitively. Thus, it adheres to 3NF, eliminating the transitive dependency within the student table. So by reaching 3NF, the design helps reducing redundancy, minimizing potential anomalies during data operation like insert, update, or delete, and promoting data integrity. So remember, these explanations are for CPA candidate who are taking the Information Systems and Controls exam of the CPA exam. This is not a database course, but hopefully it gave you a decent idea what 3NF is. Let's take a look at this multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com. A healthcare system is revamping its patient records database. The current table include patient ID, patient name, date of visit, and the visiting doctor. The visiting doctor is dependent on the date of the visit. So to know the doctor's name, you would have to know the date of the visit. It'll pull the doctor. To advance the database design from 2NF to 3NF, what should be taken? Kind of we gave you the problem. Can you go it from 2NF to 3NF? Well, would you move the visiting doctor to a separate table with data visit as a foreign key? Well, here, using the data visit as a foreign key for visiting doctor does not address the transitive dependency issue. Because what's happening is the doctor's is a transitive dependency on the date of the visit. And that is dependent on the patient ID. It didn't solve that problem. Combine patient ID and data visit into a composite primary key. Well, simply also creating a composite key, primary key, does not address the dependency of visiting doctors on the date of the visit, because the problem is you have the visiting doctor that's dependent on the date of the visit, which is a non-key attribute. Separate the date of visit and the visiting doctor into two different tables linked by patient ID. How about that? Usually to solve these problems you have to create different tables. Yes, separate the date of visit and the visiting doctor into new table and link them by the patient ID. This will solve the transitive dependency. So creating a separate table for the data visit and visiting doctor linked by the patient ID would remove the transitive dependency on a non-key attribute, therefore reaching 3NF. I would say between A, B, and C, I will keep C for now. No changes needed. Yes, changes needed. C is the correct answer. What should you do now? Go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you, especially if you're studying for the CPA exam, Information Systems and Control, or any other professional certification. Invest in yourself. Good luck, study hard, and of course, stay safe.